In the summer of 74 or 5, I came home one day and there was this big giant Yamaha organ sitting in my garage. And I was like, what is this? Well, my sister took piano lessons for a few weeks, decided she was bored and wanted an organ. And my parents, who spoiled her, bought her this huge Yamaha organ and put it in my room where I had my beanbag chairs and my Grand Funk Railroad posters and things like that. I used to sit and play and fool around at the organ. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I was making music. So a friend of mine at school had a brother who went to Berklee School of Music. And he said I should read these books by this professor named John Mohican, who wrote books on harmony and theory and counterpoint orchestration. That way, he said, when you play, at least you'll know what it is that you're doing. And then one day, I went to the living room because we had a piano, and I played on the piano stuff that I was playing on the organ. And my mom came home from shopping one day, and she heard me playing, and she walked by the piano, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, it's a piece I've been working on while football practice has been going on. And she said, oh, it's really nice. And she walked into the other room and I heard a big thud because she dropped all the groceries. She came back and she said, wait a second, you don't play the piano. You're not a musician. What are you doing? So I spilled the beans and I said, well, I've been practicing on the organ in the other room. She said, I think you're making music. You really have a talent. About 3 weeks after that, I had my first band, bought my first Fender Rhodes electric piano, and off we went. That's my start. And when I was at USC, I'll tell you what happened exactly. Is I was sick one weekend, and I saw Jesus Christ Superstar, the movie, and the West Side Story, the movie. I had never gone to theater. And I was, developing as a writer back then. And in seeing those two shows on film, there was almost every musical vocabulary I could ever want to work in. Jazz, pop, classical, rock, all of it. There was in those scores. And I said, I'm a terrible singer. I'm not going to be Billy Joel. I'm not going to be Elton John. And if I write for artists, I'll only get to write a couple of songs for them. But in the theater, I could sing through characters. I can sing through you. And so that's where the bug of theater began, from watching those movies. When I was very lucky at USC that John Houseman, famous old actor who discovered Orson Welles and et cetera, in New York we have the John Houseman Theater. He was running USC, the theater department at the time. And I wasn't a theater guy. I was a history major. But I had the chutzpah, or whatever you want to call it, to go into his office and make a meeting with him, tell him who I was and what I did. And he said, all right, I'll listen to your demo tapes. And of course he hated them because he didn't really like anything that was written post-1910 or something like that. But he liked my spirit, and so he brought me together with the entire drama department of USC. I graduated from USC, and what happened is the pop world came calling. In the early 80s, the publishing in the pop world was really in LA. And they saw my shows at USC, and they said, hey, this is great that you're doing this theater stuff, but you have a flair for real, commercial, accessible melodies. So I got my first publishing deal. And really, the 80s was about writing pop music. And I probably, I was lucky. I sold about 75 million records and had about 1,000 recordings of our songs. But it was also the best training I ever had for writing theater, because I might have to write a song for an African-American young girl during the day, and then that night write for Kenny Rogers, And so it was always those years of writing for so many different artists and where they're from and their points of view, that ironically is the best training I ever had for theater, which is interesting to me. At the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, I was getting a little bored with pop music and where that was from, and I still had that fire to do theater, and I said to myself, if they let me do it the way I want to do it, I will do it. And Jekyll and Hyde grew out of all of that. They're timeless. The classic characters and those classic storylines are always bigger than life. And to me, when things are bigger than life, they sing. They become opera. So when you put somebody in a situation where he is defying the gods, or where he can kiss you goodnight, but then he might turn around and bite you and give you everlasting life. The stakes are so high in those literary classics. The characters are so rich. then so bigger than life that to me it means music. You know, in Robert Louis Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde, there's a moment before Dr. Jekyll drinks the formula he's made. He doesn't really know what's going to happen when he drinks it. He only has his hopes and his dreams. And for him at that moment, it is his moment. And there, the song, This Is the Moment, came from that. We were listening before to a song called I Will Be There from the Count of Monte Cristo. It is a wonderful, wonderful book. And in the book, there are so many situations. The language, again, in the book is so beautiful that leads to these great songs. And, you know, that's, again, the literary classics. First of all, they're called classics for a reason. They transcend their own time. And I try to do that with no apologies as a composer. If there is a moment in a show where I can write a song that transcends that character at that moment and speaks to a contemporary audience, especially a young contemporary audience, where I'm always trying to expand the audience to bring younger people into the theater, I go for it. You know, so that's what we do. The writing of the score of a musical is really the easy part in a way, because for me as a writer, I'm such a visceral writer anyway. It's all like, I answer this question the same always. It's like fishing. The fish are there, and I go fishing every morning. And, you know, and I've sit at the piano, and sometimes you catch a big one, and sometimes you don't. But that's how I write. So if I get into a good zone, it's like shooting jump shots in basketball. You know, I can write a score pretty quickly. I don't want to tell you, but pretty quickly. I can write a whole score. But the process of then the collaboration and getting it on, that takes years. Once enough ideas have been thrown back and forth, and I feel there's something substantive there that I can write to, I do the music first. Because if I don't feel I can do 2 hours of new music for a project, I won't do it anyway. So I'll do that first. Many times, in the case of some of these literary classics, for instance, not only reading the book, I will watch the movie of the Count of Monte Cristo, of Dracula, of the Scarlet Pimpernel, of Jekyll and Hyde, and I will turn off the sound, and I will score it as if it's a silent movie. And inevitably, 75% of the score comes from me just scoring the movie. It's a secret, not anymore. But it's a true story. I'll do that. I'll see 3 or 4 versions of Dracula or of Monte Cristo. I'll turn off the sound, I'll look at it, and I'll just start scoring it. What does it feel like musically to me, these moments? And inevitably, again, so many of the motifs that become the motifs of the characters that you sing, you know, will come from that process. But then from there, it becomes incredibly collaborative. And as they say with a musical, you never finish a musical, you just abandon it to the audience. Eventually, you have to let go. Musicals aren't written, they're always rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. And that's part of the nature of the game, and therefore they take a long time. I always say this, you know, every year, thousands and thousands of records are released. Hundreds of movies come out. Thousands of books are published. But in a good year, there are 10 new Broadway musicals. So that shows you how hard it is to do that. You know, and gives some, you know, I don't know, makes it relative to whatever. It puts it in context, I think. Which of my shows have been the most challenging? Wow, that's an interesting question. They all are. They're all impossible. They're all impossible. You know, it's like when I first started telling my friends in the pop business, you know, I had some amazing years in the pop business and #1 international songs. And I said, well, I'm leaving this now. I'm going to go do theater. And to them, that was like, you're crazy. That's like saying, all right, you're going to go play baseball and you're going to play in Yankee Stadium. You know what I mean? What are the odds of that? But I'm a person, I can't wake up in the morning if I don't have a mountain to climb anyway. So I love that challenge. As far as the specific shows go, they're so specific unto themselves that each one of them has a different challenge. The overall challenge to me, though, is can I find the musical vocabulary for that show that is different or enhances something I've done before, if I still have more to say, you know, and keep it going for 2.5 hours of an entertainment. And that's hard to do. Once I find that vocabulary, and it comes from wherever it comes from, I can usually then plug in and write the rest of the score pretty quickly. I don't know how to answer that question. But with that said, though, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if it wasn't for Jekyll and Hyde and the experience that Jekyll and Hyde was in my life at the time I did Jekyll and Hyde. Because certainly financially, I was a successful pop songwriter, and there's much more financial gain in that than the theater in the short run. In the short run, theater is only really financially valuable if it has a long run. It's what they call in the business the back end. So you have to really make an enormous investment in yourself and your time to do that. It is, thank God, the success in the pop business that gave me the freedom to spend the time to do what I needed to do in the theater world. But that experience of Jekyll and Hyde, going back to the concept record in 1988-89, to the first production at the Alley Theater in Houston, Texas, of which I'm an associate artist of, that experience was so romantic and so fun, and a man named Gregory Boyd, who runs the Alley Theater, let me do theater the way I wanted to do it. So I didn't know any better. I thought, okay, I'll do it this way. It was so great that really opened the door to the rest of my career in theater. Well, first of all, I'm a big dreamer, and I'm a cockeyed optimist, and I just always have been that way. And most people who know me for a long time know I'm the same guy I was when I was a teenager. I was that's the way I've been. So one of the big obstacles was because I'm a self-taught musician, and I didn't read music when I started, and I didn't know the language, and yet I had aspirations to do these gigantic, sweeping musical scores. Well, how do I do that? How do I figure that out? And that was a big mountain to climb. And again, I did it by surrounding myself with those who knew more than I did, and who saw something in me that gave me the time and the support I needed to go there, to do that. I think, when you're a songwriter and you're trying to say, I'm a goal-oriented person. So I had said to myself, once I started making a little of a living doing this, I said, all right, by the time I'm 30, I'd love to have a #1 song in the world. By the time I'm 40, I'd love to have a show on Broadway. So I set those goals for myself because I needed something tangible like that to go for. And, we did that. But those are pretty big mountains to climb to start with. Yeah. And even today, I'm a student. I'm a student of the game. I'm a student of the craft. And I think, my heroes like Leslie Bricusse, who's a hero to me, he's about to be 80 years old this year. And he blew out the candles and he said, well, what am I going to do for the next half of my life? That's a hero to me. And I love that whole thing of always being a student, and it keeps you so young. And that's my way. A career in general, my first advice is you want to wake up in the morning and do something you love to do. And, if you don't know what that is, then be a student of the game of life until you find what that is. I don't think it's about getting jobs. I think it's about, we spend a third of our life doing whatever it is that we do. And so to take all we have is time. We're on this borrowed time. We have so little of it, and it goes so fast, believe me. So to do anything less than what you love to do when you wake up in the morning is too much of a compromise to me. So that's the #1 thing. And, of course, it depends on what field you're going into. If you're going to go into a creative field, you have to have a real thick skin, and you really can't take no for an answer. I know this sounds crazy, but it's like baseball. We are in a world of failure. It's a career of failure. Here's what I mean by that. If you're a baseball player and you get up 3 times and you only get a hit once out of every 3 times, so 2 out of 3 times you fail. If you do that over 20 years, you will be in the Hall of Fame. That's how few people have done that. All right? Well, I'll give you a great example in music. Cole Porter is certainly one of the great songwriters in America or anywhere. He has a catalog of maybe 6,000 songs, right? We probably know 40 or 50 of them if we are the biggest Cole Porter fan, right? So you see what I'm getting at. But the other thing about this business is it only takes one. It takes one Star Wars. It takes one Where the Broken Hearts Go. It takes one Les Miserables. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of it's crazy, this business, in that way. When I talk to a lot of young people about music, I do a lot of master classes. And Sting, the great artist Sting, has a philosophy that I very much agree with and adhere to, which is do your best as a student to find your own voice, to find what it is unique about you. It's not about who sings the loudest or the highest or has the longest notes. It's not who's the most sophisticated. It's what is the thing that's unique about you as an artist. Then define that. Spend time defining that. What does that mean? Defining yourself as an artist. And then spend the rest of your life refining that. Always be a student of it. Always refine it. Always try to make it better. But make it yours. And I think that's the key thing. I think you'll find that the people in this business, whether they're writers or performers, the ones who last the longest are the ones who have their own unique voices.